Good afternoon, class. Today we're going to be doing our third part of the Simple Organism series. Today we're going to be talking about protists. Okay, so a little background information about protists. They are a diverse kingdom consisting of three major subgroups within the kingdom Protista. They are algae, which are some of our plant-like protists, such as this Euglena over here. We have protozoans, which are your animal-like protists, and then finally slime molds. Okay. Now, protists serve a lot of ecological functions. For example, some of them um, act as a source of food for many marine organisms in the oceans as well as humans. Plant-like ones also produce most of the world's oxygen. And there are some protists that are pathogenic, like the ones that cause the condition malaria, which we'll look at shortly. Okay. Now, protists, they reproduce through asexual reproduction, specifically by binary fission. So in that way, they reproduce very similarly to bacteria. Now, adaptations of protists. Protists live primarily in aquatic environments, and so they have to have different types of adaptations that allow them to survive. For example, many protists have an eye spot, which allows them to see and respond to light. So if you look at here at this image of the Euglena, if you see this dark red spot right here, that is the eye spot. Okay, that little organelle, for lack of a better description, allows this Euglena to see and respond to light. In some cases, some species of Euglena are photosensitive, meaning that they need light because they are a photosynthetic organism. And so when they sense the light, they will actually swim to it. Other protists that have eye spots are photosensitive in the opposite way, meaning that when they sense light, they shy away from it, so they'll move away from it. Okay. Um, Now, another one is called flagella, which is a whip-like projection that propels the protist forward. So again, if you look at this image of the Euglena here, you'll see this tail that seems to be sticking out of this Euglena. That's actually the flagellum. It's what that is in singular. And so it literally whips it around, and that's what propels the Euglena forward. Okay. Now, some protists have what are called cilia, which are hair-like projections that are found all over the organism, and this is what allows them to move. So if you look at this image here of the paramecium, you'll see these little hair-like projections that seem to surround this foot-shaped organism. Okay, those hair-like projections are the cilia. Okay, and that they move very rapidly back and forth, and that allows the paramecia to move in all directions as necessary. There are some protists that move using something called pseudopodia, which is basically extending the cell membrane and the cytoplasm, and uses ATP energy to do this. So if you look at this image here of this amoeba, you can see these projections that are sticking out from the cell. These are pseudopods, and that's what allows the amoeba to move around. Lastly, there is something called the contractile vacuole. Its main function is to maintain the water balance within protists, but it also helps to propel some of them forward using like a jet-like propulsion. So, for example, if you look at a microscope slide of pond water, and you see some of those little cellular organisms moving at what looks like very fast speeds, chances are it is using a contractile vacuole to propel itself forward, almost like it has a jetpack. Okay, so some examples of protists. We talked about the three major groups, so we're going to kind of look at those now. Um, the first group that we're going to look at are algae. Okay, now algae can be unicellular or multicellular. So as you see in these organisms over here, this form of algae is unicellular, and here we have a multicellular form of algae. Um, Algae are aquatic, and they produce most of the Earth's oxygen. Um, some algae, like seaweeds, they are beneficial because they act as a food source for many aquatic animals and for humans. Um, Most of you, if you like seafood, specifically sushi, um, oftentimes sushi is wrapped up in leaves of seaweed, which is nothing more than a multicellular algae. The Japanese, because of their nation being so small, they rely heavily on seafood as a source of nutrition. And so they utilize seaweed heavily in salads and other dishes, including sushi. So that's how one culture of humans uses a protist, an algae, as a source of food. Now, here's the thing. Like so many things on Earth, too much of anything is considered harmful. Same thing with algae. Um, Algal blooms, like what you see in this image here, which this is an example of what we call red tide, because what you're seeing here is red algae that have bloomed to the point where it is literally turning the water red instead of the usual blue that you see back here. These algal blooms, because there's such a high concentration of algae, the algae are able to deplete the available dissolved oxygen in the immediate area. This causes fish who rely on the oxygen as well to essentially drown or suffocate in the water and kills them off. On top of that, these blooms also tend to release toxins that are dangerous to fish and to humans. Um, some years ago, the state of Florida had a massive, massive red algal bloom that surrounded about two-thirds of the state's um, beaches, and as a result, the state had to shut down those beaches in order to protect many of the beachgoers. Because if you go into the water where there's red algae, you end up absorbing through your skin the toxins, and you can become very, very sick from them. Okay, so again, too much of anything, not a good thing, even in simpler organisms such as protists. Now, the other group that I talked about was protozoans, which are the more animal-like versions of protists. Okay, and some examples of these are paramecia, amoebas, and one particular species, well, genus called Plasmodium. So here you see an example of the amoeba as you saw it before. Here are paramecia. Here is a diagram of the genus Plasmodium. This protozoan is what causes the disease malaria. Okay, it is transmitted by female mosquitoes, and it basically infects the blood cells. And there are four species of Plasmodium that are able to infect humans and cause malaria, also known as yellow fever. Malaria is often common in tropical areas, so places in South America and Africa that are in the rain that have rainforests and are near the equator. The temperatures and humid conditions there are ideal for Plasmodium to exist, and so the female mosquitoes will bite animals such as monkeys that are infected um, with this protozoan, and should that mosquito then bite a human, the human then becomes infected with the Plasmodium protozoan and will end up developing malaria. There are, of course, ways to treat malaria and so on. But usually when you travel to anywhere that's tropical in South America or Africa, usually as part of your travel plans, you're required to undergo some immunizations to help you um, protect yourself from those kinds of uh, uh, um, pests. Lastly, the type of protists that we're going to look at last is the slime molds. Um, they are collectively known as mycetozoa. The prefix referring to the fact that they are very similar to fungi. And these are also broken down into three subgroups. We've got the Myxogastria, which are a type of slime mold referred to as acellular. Then we've got the Discaladi, which are the cellular slime molds, and the protosteloids, which are amoeba-like slime molds and are able to form fruiting bodies. So if you look at these images here, these are some visual examples of what we're talking about. So like here and here and here, we've got what would be called fruiting bodies. So these are more likely your prosteloids. This and this are probably examples of your uh, Dictystellatia, because if you look at that, look at them, they kind of look similar to um, mushrooms or other type of molds that are fungi. That pretty much covers protists, not a whole lot of information. I want you to focus specifically on the adaptations of protists. So the eye spot, the flagella, the cilia, the contractile vacuole, as well as the general um, classification of plant and animal-like. So definitely no algae versus protozoans. Okay, you guys take care.